They're dead, Dave.
What, Captain Hollister?
Everybody's dead, Dave.
What, Todd Hunter? What, Selby? Not Chen.
He's dead, Dave. Everybody is dead. Everybody is dead, Dave.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Everybody's Dead Dave, a Red Dwarf review podcast featuring myself, Adam Martyn.
And me, Phil Hawkins.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you are brand new, well, thank you very much for joining us. We highly advise that you go and check out our reviews from the start, as that is kind of the point of what we're doing, isn't it? We're going from the very start of Red Dwarf all the way up until the present day. And if you are new, Phil is someone who's watched since the 1990s, that far-off land that we all like to remember.
Distant past.
The distant past. And I am someone who's watching the show for the very first time. And it's thrown up some interesting different perspectives over certain episodes. And we've actually reached Series 3, Episode 1, which... okay, its actual title, if you go on Netflix, is Sdrawkcab.
That was an admirable attempt.
Thank you. That was a good try.
I think that was good. Yeah.
If you're not familiar and you're like, what on earth does that mean? It's the word backwards spelt backwards because that is the title of this episode, Backwards. And the plot synopsis of this episode is, as Rimmer is taking Kryton for a driving lesson in Starbug, they find themselves being whisked away through a time hole and end up on Earth, where time is running backwards. Ooh, time. Love a bit of time. Timey-wimey stuff. So... yeah, this is the start of Series 3, and, I mean, to kick things off, it's a very different introduction to
Series 1 there's just so much that is just different about this show in this series, that right from the start, even the titles, which I think is what you were alluding to there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Star Wars parody going too fast where you can't read it and all
that. Yeah, because we get this title scroll. And yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Because like in the 90s, this must have been like, nobody must have read this. Because if you're watching it on TV, there's no way. You might glance the occasional word, but there is a lot of text. And so I'm guessing it must be intentional that you don't really read it. But... with the modern technology that we have nowadays, we can freeze frame, and unlike on VHS, when you pause a VHS, you still can't read what's going on because it flickers and you get these lines everywhere and stuff. But nowadays we have Netflix, and Netflix pauses perfectly.
Freeze frame perfect. I think I paused it once or twice just to check, but from what I saw, I think it is actually just a recap of the first two series. I don't think, apart from like the very last bit where it's like the continuum continues or something. Like I think.
Oh, so you didn't read it all?
I didn't read it all. No,
you didn't read it all.
Again, because like you said, for the speed thing, I kind of thought, oh, maybe this is the intention. Like maybe I'm not supposed to. It was more out of curiosity, so I assumed it was a full recap and just cracked on.
It's more of a filling in what's happened in between. So it's in a way, it's like those Star Wars scrolls. So we basically get the filling in of why several things are different. So we get what was it? So obviously last season ended off on a cliffhanger.
It did,
didn't it? It ended off with finding out that Dave Lister was pregnant.
Yes,
and with twins, no less. And here we get told what happened. Now, how do you feel about this? Because once again, Red Dwarf has done this to us, where they've set up a cliffhanger and they have not dealt with it in the body of the story, but have just given it a quick throwaway at the beginning, this time in a text scroll.
Yeah, I mean, like, I get it, it's funny, but if it's true what you say, like, because again, I didn't read the full thing, so I just assumed it was...
Okay, I will fill you in.
Okay, go for
on what happened. So... I don't have it in front of me, but the general gist of what happened with the babies is that he gave birth via cesarean, and they sort of instantly aged within the space of about 3 weeks up to 18-year-olds. Okay. So within 3 weeks, they were like 18-year-olds, and in order to keep them alive, they had to return them to the dimension they came from. So return them to their what the text refers to as their fathers, who are female.
Yes, yeah.
So that's where the twins have gone. So he did give birth. Now, I'm interested. I was reading I think it might have been on Wikipedia that was everything in this text scroll was meant to be an episode.
Okay.
And when the writers went to write it, they got about halfway through the script and decided it just wasn't very funny. And interestingly, in one interview, let me see if I can find out which writer it was, which of the two it was that said it. That's it. In an interview with Grant Naylor in the Red Dwarf's magazine, issue 6 from August 1992, he said that as well as it not being very funny, it was a bit potentially offensive to women. So
I mean, yeah, that's fair enough. I just think
that's why it got canned.
It is sad in a way we don't get it resolved in some way, shape, or form. Well, I guess we do with the text scroll, but yeah, like you said, because it goes so fast, and which is a bit, as you say, bizarre that even at the time they said in 1989, like you're saying, like unless you had some way of like freeze frame technology back then, which I think domestically would have only been on laser discs. But I don't think you could record to Laserdisc. So it seems odd that even at the time, there'd be no real way to read all of it unless you tried to look through the flicker of a VHS tape. So if they scrapped it, I guess they had to move it along. But I don't know, maybe a fast text scroll wasn't the best way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it kind of fits in with the jokey sort of nature of the series. But if you want to know what's going on, so there was the twins. What happened to them? And then there was also why Kryton is back. So we were wondering, we thought that Kryton must have been driving around the ship the whole time on his sort of motorbike thing that he got on off Dave. But apparently, according to the text scroll, that is a space motorbike and can go off into space. And he's been riding around on that, but crashed. And the crew find him sort of disassembled because he crashed. And they put him back together, but they weren't able to restore his original personality, which is why he acts slightly different.
This is solving questions I was going to bring up later. And I take it, is there something about Holly?
There is something about Holly. Holly decides to have the quote is a head sex change to match the appearance of Hilly, who he encountered and fell in love with in the parallel universe.
This makes sense, yep, because that was a question I had later as well. Yep.
No longer have Norman Lovett. And
for shame.
Yes, which is a sad loss. But we do have Hattie, I've forgotten her last name. Is it Hattie Hayridge or something like that? Oh, I've forgotten it already.
I think it was. I'm glad you explained it because I noticed in the credits, because obviously having not read it, when I saw what to me was Hilly appear, I was like, oh, Hilly's back, that's cool. But then I noticed in the credits, she's credited as Holly, and I was like, hang on a minute. But again, now that you've explained it, it makes it. But this is what I mean, like, I could have stopped to read it now, but I'm just thinking of, like, at the time, who were they expecting to... Who was expected to read this?
Yeah, I know.
Do you know what I mean? It just seems like a really baffling decision. Like, you could have even had Holly, Hilly, whoever appear, like in the season 2, like transmission messages they did, like recapping. You could have even just done a quick one of them where they say that, like, to you, maybe that would have worked better than a fast text scroll. I don't know, but thank you for clearing that up. Now a lot of things make a lot more sense now. But doesn't that go to show if you don't read it, then you'll probably end up with the same questions I had in my head before it got answered.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, this also, though, the thing about the twins contradicts Future Echoes, the second episode, where his son Bexley lived with him on Red Dwarf into the future, and that's who Rimmer sees die. But here he's being sent back to live with his mother in the other universe.
Yeah, I mean, who knows at this point? I'm wondering if it'll get mentioned again. Obviously, you might know, so no spoilers. But I am curious now because now that you've said it, it all gets explained away in a text scroll. That feels very much like they wanted to go, right, we're done with this now. Do you know what I mean? Like, right, we've had that now. End of. See you later. Otherwise, it would have had maybe more time dedicated to it. That's my take on it, anyway.
Yeah.
And I noticed with the theme, we get the end credits theme basically at the start without the lyrics. And maybe it's just because I'm going through it the first time. I do miss the sort of slower opening theme. That felt quite epic, and seeing the ship and all that. I do like the lyricless theme. And I didn't write in my notes at first because you get clips of the gang up to stuff, and I was like, "Oh, are we doing one of those things where it's like, here's what's to come in today's episode?" And having seen it, I'm like, "Okay, I'm guessing this is what's coming up in the whole series." Because there's a lot of stuff obviously that didn't appear, and I think that's it was a cool little montage sequence, but right even from that, and then right into the first scene, as you said, like so much has changed. Like they've clearly had a budget increase.
Yeah,
like a
definitely.
massive budget increase. Like
They've
Rimmer's
had
got
complete
a different
redesigns
outfit.
of set. There's new costumes, there's new sets. They've got an extra cast member, so they can obviously afford an extra regular cast member as well. Yeah, there's definitely more budget going on here. Talking of the sets, what do you think of their new bunk room? Because they've got
I was gonna say, like the little mood lighting going on. Also watching something, I was like, yeah, I dig it. It's a lot.
It's
more...
very sort of Space 1999 / Aliens. That kind of spaceship vibe.
But I
to
liked it was more like dimmer in a way, because I think we've said this before. More so, I think in series 1 of Red Dwarf, where everything was very well lit. Which we've said before was a thing back in the late 80s in TV anyway, that everything was like overlit, and it got better in series 2. But just from that, as you said, from that opening scene, I think it's lit perfectly. It's like you say, that sort of right space age vibe where you can still see the detail, but it's not too bright. It doesn't look like a set. No, I really like the new bunk room, and I'm sure we'll see more of it because we only get that one scene, don't we, at the start in this one?
Yeah,
of the bunk.
And I'm not sure if they explain it here, but I know I've read that the explanation is that they've basically moved into the officers' bunks. That's why it's looks slightly nicer than their old grey drab bunks.
Yeah, which makes sense. Although I have to say, in that scene,
they must have finally been decontaminated
after all that time. I must say though, in that opening scene, I kind of felt the Flintstones gag was a little bit drawn out.
Oh, did you?
Me.
I was going to ask you about that because I thought, in contrast to the drawn out gags that we had in the last couple of seasons, because that's been a criticism a couple of times where they drag it out and the punchline doesn't quite land. Like, it's not a very funny punchline usually.
Yeah.
But I actually really liked the punchline to this one. I thought it was really good.
This is crazy. Why are we talking about going to bed with Wilma Flintstone?
You're right. We're nuts. This is an insane conversation.
She'll never leave Fred, and we know it.
And I think the timing of it was just right, I think, for me.
Yeah, I think that I like the punchline. I just think the build to it took too long for me. Like,
okay.
I don't know, like, the whole thing, like, Fred would never leave her. That's funny, but I don't know, just the whole... I don't know, it just felt too long. There was a moment where I was like, okay, let's have the punchline now. Do you know what I mean?
I was looking into the American one. The Americans did a pilot of doing an American version of Red Dwarf in the 90s, and they recreated this scene, the Wilma the Wilma joke, the Wilma Flintstone joke. And if you think this one was drawn out, that one is very drawn out. It just doesn't work. Like, I really like it in this episode. It does not work in the American version at all.
Oh boy. Well, if we ever get to that, that'll be
if we can ever track down the whole episode,
through.
we will do a special on it.
We will.
If anybody knows where we can get the whole episode, do let us know, because we'd be very interested in watching it. I can only find clips at the moment, various little bits of clips.
I think you or someone in the comments might have mentioned either on like one of the DVD or Blu-ray sets. It
was when we first started. I mentioned that I vaguely remembered it being on there, but actually, having looked that up, it was a documentary about it with clips in it.
Okay.
So it's not the actual whole episode, unfortunately.
That's fair. So when we see moving from the bunk, we're in Starbug 1, and as you said, we see Kryton and Rimmer in his snazzy new outfit. And again, I kind of miss his second technician one because it looked a bit pathetic, but that just suited Rimmer so well. But the emerald green is a very, very snazzy colour.
You can tell he designed it himself as well, with the funky little hat as well, with the little aerial sticking up. Yeah, the little antenna coming up with the hat. It is absolutely something that Rimmer would design.
Absolutely. And I noted seeing Kryton, I was like, yes, nice to see him back with Robert Llewellyn now as Kryton. And
yes,
he looks like the makeup is so much better than it was in Series 2. So much better. And I know that's something you mentioned when we covered that episode. You were like, it does get better. And like, it's just leaps and bounds. Like I got 2 pictures earlier and I was like, wow, yeah, that is
how did you find the character himself? Because obviously your only introduction, up to this point, your main image in your head is the original Kryton, played by a different actor. So what does this version of Kryton feel to you?
I liked it. I mean, I was shocked a bit to hear the American accent, because obviously in Series 2, I think we sort of said he felt very much like a C-3PO kind of butler. But it makes sense now that you've talked about the opening crawl again, but I didn't know that. So I was like, ooh, this is an accent shift. And
it's Canadian, I think, the accent they were going
sorry,
for.
Robert, Canadian. And I wrote in my notes, he's gone from like being a C-3PO to like sort of a really toned down Max Headroom, which is a character I mentioned before. Again, I think the accent sounds very similar to that style, and also it was the bit where he's like, repeating himself, where he's like stuttering the word.
Yes, I had that down as a note. I put Kryton anxiety mode reminded me of Max Headroom. I wrote that down.
Max in the 80s, man. He was getting around everywhere, but no, I still thought it worked. Like, obviously, yeah, it was different from my introduction, and like for the first 30 seconds, I was like, ooh, an American accent. I don't know, a Canadian accent. I don't know how it fit with the character. But as the episode went on, I warmed to it, and I thought it really worked. And Robert Llewellyn was great, as you've said from the start. But he stepped into it seamlessly. And I hope, is this the point where he becomes like a main regular character?
Yeah,
now?
He's in it now forevermore.
Yes, that's what I want to hear. He does not leave.
He is in it for the long haul.
And it's a great scene. I think he nails the awkwardness of Kryton really well. Like when he's going through the handbook of the signs and the...
I failed, haven't I?
Just proceed.
You're going to hold it against me, aren't you? That one mistake.
I did think the ejector scene thing, for some reason, that looked a bit naff. And I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
I know when you see him like pop out, it's like a little clear, like a dummy
model.
Or a model.
Yeah.
And it just... Yeah.
Because the model work, generally, and in this episode, is very good.
Oh yeah, everything
ships.
with Starbug is like brilliant. Yeah,
all of the ship stuff is always very good. It's so detailed, it's brilliant. But using model people doesn't quite work. It never works really.
No.
Using little model people, it takes me out of it. I remember I was a big fan of Power Rangers back in my childhood, and they used to they'd have the Zords. I mean, Power Rangers is pretty hokey in terms of the effects anyway.
That's one.
But let's ignore that. But as bad as the Zords were, which let's face it, were men dressed in suits, when they did like a little model Power Ranger sat like standing on top of it, that was obviously just a bit of plastic. That always took me out of it even more, even as a kid. So yeah, that kind of reminded me a bit of that.
Yeah, but like you said, the model work on the whole, like especially with like the Starbug stuff for 1989, is pretty damn good. Like, and it's so nice to see. It just, I think, proves that model work is so good when used like that in sci-fi. Like, I'm sure as we go on, in like the late 90s and probably the 2000 stuff, things will probably be, I'm guessing, more like CG based, which is fine, sign of the times and all that. But it's just nice to see good model work in a sci-fi show.
I really like that whole, other than that model bit, like you were saying, the whole of the test flight, like taking your driver's test. It's got that kind of feel of like, okay, real world, but let's transplant it into space, and make it a little bit absurd. It was good. I liked it. Are you a driver? Do you drive? Have you taken a test?
Unfortunately, my eyes are not strong enough to partake in a driving test, although I did used to be obsessed with road signs as a young child for some reason. So I had a Know Your Traffic Signs book, which you normally get when you're studying for your test. I had one of those at age 4, and I read that thing back to front. So I got like the joke still resonated with me because I still found it funny, and I've heard mates' stories about it. But yeah, it was well done, and I thought the way they adapted it for space was quite. Even
and
the
they
more
use
crass
all of the terminology and the phrasing and stuff like, now please show me to your vehicle. And, that's something that they actually say. And
yeah. And you could just tell Rimmer, if this was like a program fully based on Earth, he'd definitely be something like a driving instructor. Like, you could just see it. And again, it works. It works. And After all these shenanigans, and they take Starbug 1 out for a test drive, and they find a time hole, which is always a fun. I don't know why. I've heard that before in other sci-fi shows like Doctor Who, and the phrase "time hole" just makes me giggle, and I know that probably makes me very immature, but I don't know. There's just something about it which makes me giggle a lot. And of course, where do they end up? The English countryside, because where else would you end up after falling through a time hole?
3 million years away.
That's it. And so we've got some location work again, which is nice.
Yeah, apparently, you can tell I'm full of the facts this time because I've been actually brushing up on the Wikipedia and IMDb pages. But that was filmed just outside of Manchester.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense, I guess, because I think in the credits it's like I can't remember the company that made it for the BBC, but it said something company made for BBC Northwest, so that makes sense. That makes sense that they'd be around there. Yeah. Oh well, it looked like a very nice part of outer Manchester, and they didn't get it on a rainy day.
What I want to know when they crashed, because they crash in this park into the water, and then you see them driving a boat to the. Where did they get the boat from?
Yeah, I thought this. It's like they've just acquired. Like, did Starbug have a speedboat, or have they just acquired it? It's clearly one of those moments, that I guess sitcoms can get away with, where they can just do it, and they're not going to ask questions. But
unless you're recording a podcast, reviewing it, and then we will ask the question. Because
I thought that I was
like, where is this speedboat? I was just like,
where have they got this from?
Dingy motorboat thing.
That's it. And we learn pretty quickly they find a stone that says, what was it? Nod null. That's it. And of course, it's backwards. And this entire dimension they've fallen in is backwards. And as they sort of explain it, there's like the little bit of dialogue when they go like walking around. And I don't know why it made me laugh so much. It's that shot where it's like, a crowd of people on a street. And you've just got Kryton and Rimmer, and Rimmer's antenna has been raised to like an obscenely high height, and he's looking around really. I don't know why, that just really tickled me because it looks so out of place. So I thought that was great. But I put that filming this whole backwards event must have been, I bet the guys filming at the time read the script and were like, oh my god, like we've got to, film everything and then reverse it. Quite ambitious, I think, for the time, to do it as full out as they do.
And there must have been quite a lot of logistics to it. There's one scene where they're walking down a crowded street and everyone else is walking backwards, but they're walking forwards. Yeah. So I'm guessing they were walking backwards. Everyone else was walking forwards and they were walking backwards, because it's much easier to just coordinate 2 people walking backwards than it is a whole like 50 extras.
Could you imagine organising those extras? Like, right, everyone start walking backwards and don't bump it. That's like an actor's worst. And that we used to do those games, it's like move around the space, but don't like hit each other. That would actually be an actor's worst nightmare. But no, you're right. Logistically, it works. It works very well. Like in this episode.
The only times I was a little bit unsure about how it was working was when it looked a bit jarring when they started, like, because most of the time they were walking around going forward and doing stuff in a forward way while everyone else was going backwards. But there would be moments like when they were eating or drinking where obviously what they were doing had been filmed and reversed. Yes. And that there was a slight jarring moment because it was obvious that they weren't acting the same way as they were 2 seconds ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what I thought as I went along. Like, there was 1 or 2 moments where I thought, like, wow, they're really going for like the backwards gimmick for the whole episode. And like I say, I think for the most part, it does work, especially for the time. Like, I'm sure there's many more sophisticated ways you could do it now, make it look even smoother. But for 1989, I was quite impressed. And on dates, it made me chuckle when they found the paper and they said it was 1993. I was like, ooh, the slightly near future for the viewers at home,
Yeah, because I think this was 1989. I think this episode would have aired.
Only a few years, only a few years ahead.
What was I going to say?
Were you going to tell us where you were in 1993?
Where was I in 1993?
Where were you?
I was in primary school.
Those were the days.
I was probably in 1993 was when I was about to start watching this, roughly when I was starting watching Red Dwarf.
Oh, mad. Did you start with this episode, do you remember? Or did you like come in halfway through the series? Or
No, if I was watching it in 1993, that wasn't when this aired. Because this aired in 1989.
Oh god. I'm getting confused.
Getting confused with when it's set and when it aired.
This is what this program's done to me already. Goodness, yeah.
No, what I was going to say is that I was very tempted to, but I ran out of time today and I didn't have time to do it. I was tempted to get a bit of the audio from the episode of somebody speaking in reverse and then reverse it and see what it said.
Yeah, that would have been neat.
That would have been neat. And then I have on the IMDb trivia bit for this episode. Apparently, the first bit of trivia on this is when the pub manager gives Kryton and Rimmer a telling off in backwards speak, what he is really saying is, "You are a stupid, square-headed, bald git, aren't you, eh? I'm pointing at you. I'm pointing at you, but I'm not actually addressing you. I'm addressing the one prat in the entire country who's bothered to get hold of this recording, turn it around and actually work out the rubbish that I'm saying. What a poor, sad life he's got." Yes. That was almost me.
I love stuff like that. Like someone's actually... Oh, God. They know what they're doing, these guys, don't they?
Oh,
They know
yeah.
exactly what they're doing. No, that's brilliant. To be honest, if I was watching this back in there, that kid would have been me.
Yeah, and to be
Absolutely would have been me.
fair though, I mean, it would have taken a lot. I mean, reversing it now is a pretty simple. Okay, I'll just record this off of Netflix, the audio, and reverse it in Adobe Audition. It'll take me 2 minutes. Whereas I imagine
Back
in
in the
1989 that would have been quite an effort for somebody to do.
Yeah. I guess you would have had to have like, I want to say like an open tape thing where you could like control the reverse speed.
Yeah, like a reel-to-reel machine or something.
Yeah, because most rewinds back in the day, I believe you couldn't, when you rewound, you couldn't listen at the same time. It was literally like you had to wait and then listen. I think there were probably some machines that let you like watch as it rewound with the sound, but certainly the VHS or cassette formats I've had, if you're rewinding, you can't listen. Do you know what I mean? You've got to wait until that's ready. But hey, clever people, these guys. And we cut to Lister and Kat on the ship, and it's been 3 weeks since they've been looking for these guys. And I was going to say, for this first scene, Kat seemed quite subdued. Like, the whole scene actually was it felt very subdued. Not in a bad way. It just felt very, like, low energy for them as characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it maybe echoed the opening scene, where they're watching the TV, because, again, it's not really high energy. They're just sort of having a chat. And I just sort of... I liked it in a way. Not that I don't like the two of them bouncing off the walls. Like, I love it, but I just like that they had this little moment in the episode where they're looking for their mates and they're just, quite calm and having a chat about it. And yeah, I don't know. What did you think? I quite liked it.
Yeah, I think from my memory, again, it's been a while since I watched these episodes, but I do think Kat kind of does. Because in the first two series, he's very much like, hey, all the time, non-stop. That's just what he is. But I do think he sort of tones it down a little notch from this point onwards, which is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. Because, like we've said, I think one of my criticisms of Kat in the past anyway, especially if you've listened to this podcast regularly, is that, well, not that he doesn't get much to do, but as you say, he is given like the same thing to do. Like you said, that high octane, like energy all the time, which is fine. But I like the fact we're starting to see him more than just that in the series.
Yeah, and they're starting to involve him more in jokes. He's it's a bit like at the top with the Wilma joke and things like that, and some other jokes that come up in this episode where the subject of the joke isn't the fact that he's a descendant of a cat. Which, almost for the entire first two seasons, almost every joke involving the cat was about the fact that he was a cat.
Absolutely, which gets, as we said, it can get old pretty quickly. And he feels, in this episode anyway, he genuinely felt more like one of the gang, rather than just someone they had around because he was there, sort of thing. Like, the little in-jokes he has along the way with Lister, like, I love the whole smart party thing. Oh, that really made me smile. But it's like the same with the in-jokes. He feels now like he's one of the I know it's probably an outdated term, but like one of the boys, if you like, he's one of the gang rather than just the sort of the butt of the joke or the weird one they don't like to interact with unless it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I don't think it's that outdated because I mean they are literally up. It's a more recent thing actually in the last sort of few seasons, including the one the special that was on last year. They now sort of call themselves the boys from the Dwarf.
Oh, there you go. With Cat included, so that just that proves my point. And when they go through the time hole, little giggle. When they come down the stairs because they disguise Starbug. Starbug's invisible in this place. The shot of them coming down the invisible stairs, I thought was a pretty decent blue screen for 1989 on BBC television.
Yeah, it was good.
It wasn't too shabby. Yeah.
It very much reminded me of Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home.
Yeah, I've seen that clip. It reminded me as well of, don't they do something similar in Sharda in Doctor Who?
I don't know.
There is like I swear there's like a stairwalk thing to nowhere. I vaguely remember.
Yeah.
What's the villain in that seizing Romana and like taking her into? I don't know. I could be making it up. It reminded me of something definitely, but yeah.
Because in Star Trek 4, they literally park a Klingon bird of prey, which is also a green ship that kind of has bug-like sections, almost like bulging sort of sections. They park that cloaked, have time traveled back in a park in America, obviously there, but in a park, and they come down steps and it's all cloaked. So it just reminded me of that. I'm not sure.
Did Star Trek 4 come first?
I think it must have done, because they would have been. Yeah,
I'll have a quick look now. I think you might be right, because I don't know why I know this, considering I haven't seen any of them. I know the first Star Trek film, the motion picture, was 1979, I think. So, there you go. Star Trek 4: The Voyage, 1986.
So yeah,
so
a few
3 years
before.
prior. So maybe a bit of cheeky inspiration,
Well, yeah, and I think probably a very deliberate referencing. They've obviously very deliberately referenced Star Wars with the opening crawl. This is a show that likes to reference other sci-fis.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. And so once the other lads have joined the fray, they sort of go through the motions, but when they see the Nodnol sign, they don't instantly assume. I do think it's a great setup, with Lister going, "Oh yeah, like of course," because you think, "Oh, he's cracked it," but he thinks they're in Bulgaria.
Hang on, wait a minute. Nod, no. It's in Bulgaria, isn't it? Are you sure? The number one subject at school. No, Bulgaria, rich in arable produce and mineral wealth, just south of Bosnia. And what's silly? That's obviously Bulgarian for kilometres, isn't it? You're so smart. I'm glad I came with you. Well, we are the smart party.
And the little dance and the beatbox, it's cheesy, but it's so adorable. I kind of like it. Like, it's very of its time, but it made me smile. And I do have to say, though, because we get this thing through most of the episode before it gets resolved about, the Lister and Cat thinking they're in Bulgaria. And do you think they do that now? Like they do like the Bulgaria joke? Because they're not digging at Bulgarians necessarily. But there are one or two jokes. Yeah, there are one or two jokes later on. I think it's in the talent show, isn't it? Where they go like, oh, they have simple taste or something.
There is a few bits of dated comedy in this, which I don't think they would do now. They say, in reference to Bulgarians, they say, oh, they're Bulgarian, they have very simple taste, which isn't too bad, but it's still generalizing. I mean, they might do that today, but in the same scene, a couple of lines before, Cat goes, "It's a moron convention," which I really don't think. That one really made me cringe, and I was like, "Oh, that's a bit like don't
grit teeth." Yeah, the one that made me grit my teeth a little bit was the whole, and I get why it was done but the whole when they think it's Bulgarian, they're trying to figure out the language, and they're doing like the whole adding ski on everything, and like
Frenchki, Budski, Palski. Look, there's an address ski, here ski. Can you drop us off ski?
Like I know why they did it, because it's the whole, it's the funny thing of they don't understand that he's just speaking backwards. But I don't know, like the first time I was like, oh, okay, but they do it for quite a while before they realise, and I don't know, after a while I was just like, it was that moment of like, this is a bit...
Yeah, but what I do like in that scene is that in the translation of the backwards guys speak, he thinks they're speaking Bulgarian. So I quite like that. Yeah. That was a nice little thing.
Nice little nod. And I did laugh when they stole the bike and they instantly went backwards. I don't know why that made me laugh, because I should have seen that coming, but I think just the way it was shot and executed and how fast they go, it just made me chuckle.
One thing I would say is the logic of what happens backwards and what doesn't, when they're interacting with stuff, makes no sense whatsoever. Like, it's purely absolutely. Like the plot wants this thing to happen backwards to them, but this thing they can do perfectly normally. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Do you think that's partly like the whole sci-fi sitcom, we'll just do what we want when we want, and who's going to care? You know?
Who's going to care? Exactly. Somebody might notice it, but I noticed it, but I don't care. It's fine.
The Red Dwarf creators would probably say, oh, well, like on the reverse backwards thing, you have what a poor sad life. But hey, that's why we do this. It's all good fun. And Lister and Cat find Kryton and Rimmer on a poster advertising some sort of variety show, which if you watch this on YouTube, you'll notice that poster is indeed, I believe, in our little introduction.
It is.
Yeah, see, I was like,
created by George Sheard there.
Absolutely. And they go to attend the show in this seedy underground pub, which I'm sure all comedians have done on the circuit at some point. And they have their little show, don't they? Yeah,
where to us they are doing stuff, really boring stuff, like eating an egg and drinking a drink. But to the audience, because they're doing it forward to us, it looks backwards to them. They're called the Reverse Brothers, but backwards, obviously. And they find it hilarious. And then there's Kat and Lister who have found them in the back, going, "What are they laughing at?"
Yeah. They've clearly got a good job, because they only do two things, and that's their set. I'm like, wow, if I that'd be. Imagine that if I went on stage, sang one song, was like, "Oh, cheers, thanks very much. I'll take the money now." That made me chuckle, that they only do two things.
Yeah, I quite liked the voice that Chris Barry was doing for that bit as well.
Yeah, that sort of like weird old school English showman thing, like the old comedy stuff. Like, oh yeah, I'm crying here, very. But again, I think that's so Rimmer, isn't it? That's exactly what Rimmer would draw on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, though, like bending the rules, because obviously like Kryton drinks the water, but then when Rimmer and Cat drink the little bit of beer that's in their pint glasses, and they aim to drink it, but then it all comes back up anyway. It's like, wait, so are people in control of when they drink or put it back? Or is it just do you know what I mean? Or it's one of those, because, at the end of the day, we're nitpicking, but it did make me think, because Kryton just drinks that water straight up, whereas,
Yeah. In terms of just generally all of the reverse stuff, I didn't find it as funny as I was expecting to, because I'd be interested to hear how you found it, because you're seeing all this for the very first time, whereas I've seen it sort of 3 or 4 times over the years. This episode. So is it that I know what's going to happen, and therefore it's not as funny for me? What did you find it funny?
I found moments of it funny, like the fight at the end I thought was funny because also of how ambitious it was, because it goes on for quite a bit, and obviously it must have involved a lot of setup and stuff. I feel maybe in retrospect, it's hard in a way, because they've set up that this universe is backwards through and through, so everything has to be backwards. But I feel it was weird to say, but overused, which probably diminished the comedy of it. Because it's like with any gimmick, isn't it? You see it too many times in a short space of time, it's not gonna have the same effect, whether it's going for funny, like for gags, or for, I don't know, what, emotion, drama. So yeah, I think I was impressed by the fight, but towards the end, like a bit before that, I wasn't tired of it, but yeah, you're right, I wasn't laughing anymore. I was just sort of watching it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's kind of how I felt as well. I absolutely appreciate the technical achievement they achieved with it, because it's fantastic. And it must have taken a lot of planning, and that fight scene, like going through the wind, again, you can tell their budget has been upped here, because they thrown through windows and all sorts of things, and it does look really good, and the technical achievement is great, but the comedy of it, I don't know, it started to wane quite a bit.
I think could you argue maybe they almost shot themselves in the foot by establishing that literally everything in this world is backwards, like we're saying about this, like the overused gimmick thing? Maybe would it work better if it was only established like certain things were backwards rather than everything? Maybe.
I mean, no, I think with because again, this is them using a sort of hard science sci-fi plot line of, the big crunch. The universe is going into reverse after it's finished expanding, and this is what is going to happen. So it makes sense that everything would be reversed. I just don't know if they focused on it as gags too much. Whereas if they just had it going on in the background for some things, and then a gag every so often, might have been better. I don't know. There were gags in it I liked. I did like how they used it, and some of them were the more less visual ones, like when they were talking about things and what the implications of it would be. Like,
Take war. War is a wonderful thing here. In 50 years' time, the Second World War will start. Backwards.
And that's a good thing?
Millions of people will come to life. Hitler will retreat across Europe. Liberate France and Poland. Disband the Third Reich and bog off back to Austria.
And then you get, immediately afterwards, I think it's Kat that says, or it might be Lister, but I think it's Kat, says,
Oh, Santa Claus, what a bastard. He's the big fat git who sneaks down chimneys and steals all the kids' favourite toys.
I mean, that he raises a fair point. He raises a fair point. So.
And so it's. I think actually I found the more dialogue jokes that used the concept funnier than the visual ones.
Yeah, so maybe like more of a focus on the dialogue gags about it rather than the effects sort of thing. Might have worked a bit better. Save it for the big things like the fight and stuff. I've got to say as well, and I know, so near the end, when Lister and Kat go backstage and they have a chat with Rimmer and Kryton, and they're like, oh, well, we don't want to leave. We've got a good gig going here, if you like. I know it sets it up for, the event, they get fired and then the fight happens and all that. But I do think, especially with Rimmer, I wrote, I find it hard to believe, even after 3 weeks, that both of them would want to stay in this universe, even though they've got this fun little thing. Do you know what I mean? I was just like, I know it's a comedy, but I was like,
yeah,
even in the realm of comedy, it's a tiny, for me, it was a tiny bit of a stretch.
Possibly, though, with Rimmer, I suppose, if he's getting admiration and, something that he's not used to getting and craves, that for the first time he's getting people applauding him, and that might be why. I don't know why Kryton wants to stay. But...
Jesus, yeah. No, I think it was just like a thought that popped in my head, because obviously we haven't seen the 3 weeks pass for Rimmer and Kryton, have we? We literally see them arrive, and then we follow Lister and Kat finding them 3 weeks later. So maybe if we'd seen a bit of the build and like maybe that gradual rise to the success they have, maybe then I would have been a bit like, oh yeah, I get why they'd want to stay more. Whereas when you hear it, to me, it just comes very much out of left field. Yeah. When they're like, oh, no, we want to stay. It's like, wait, what? Because I was like, I thought you were just getting a job, as they said, until the others come and rescue them. But what you're saying makes sense. Like, of course, Rimmer loves the admiration. But maybe even if they'd had one scene, like, showing that build, like this first audience, I think I just would have believed it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But they get fired anyway.
They could have had that. They could have had that scene before the 3 week jump, maybe, where they do have a first performance, and then you see Rimmer go up on stage, do a bit of an act, and then is like, oh, they love me.
Yeah, they
love me. They really love me.
Exactly. Just a little something like that. Doesn't have to be much. Just little thing here and there. But of course they get fired for a fight that hasn't happened, which results in the fight we've been mentioning, which, as we've said, is a great technical achievement of the episode. And then they're all off back to Starbug 2, because what happens to Starbug 1? Because that's just established that it's under the water.
Did they just leave it there?
Well,
or did they tow it back?
I'll be keeping an eye out to see if we see Starbug 1 specifically reappear, and if they have an explanation for... again, it's a sitcom. They might just do that thing of it appears and no questions asked, because you're right, they may have towed it. But I just thought that. I was like, they're all going into Starbug 2, like up the stairs, and I was like, so are we leaving Starbug 1 in the backwards realm at the bottom of the lake?
My headcanon is that they towed it back.
Yeah, but again, just leaning back to when they arrived, though, because, when they first arrive, we see bits floating in the water, like computer panels and stuff. So I thought, wait, so is Starbug 1... Or that, there's bits floating in the water.
There's a little bits, but we do also then get a scene of them still in the cockpit underwater. So
this is true.
It hasn't been completely destroyed.
And then the random speedboat appears. So
yeah, which must have come from somewhere. Just handily have a speedboat in the hole.
Yeah.
This is the first episode where we get to see the Starbugs, actually, because the sort of ship they left the Red Dwarf on in the past was Blue Midget.
Yes,
but
it was.
Starbug
Blue
will
Midget,
be a quite a significant part of the show going forward.
Oh, good. I like the design. I like Starbug. Yeah, I look forward to seeing more of it and some more great model work whilst it lasts. Before inevitably, I'm sure CGI will take over. And the last gag, if you like, is cats in the bushes, as it were, and we get that great close up of Danny John Jules emerging, looking horrified, his hair all in a frizz, and he simply says, "Don't ask." What did you think?
That was a good visual one, I thought. I was expecting that. I mean, I kind of knew, I had a vague memory of that happening. I couldn't remember which character it was. I couldn't remember the circumstances it happened, but I knew that somewhere in there was a toilet gag.
Yeah.
So I was kind of waiting for it, and it makes sense that it's the last ending gag. It kind of works quite well.
And I'm glad they didn't elaborate on it further. They just had "don't ask," and that was all you needed. Just don't ask, and let's go. Roll credits, So
yes, and in a similar vein, let's not discuss it in too fine a detail here.
Yes, let's not. You audience members can get an idea for themselves. And I noticed we get a new recording of the end song, or it sounds like a different recording, ever so slightly. To my ears, and I could be going completely balmy, it sounded like either a different singer or like a remastered recording compared to series 1 and 2.
Okay, I have to admit, I stopped playing almost immediately as soon as the theme tune started. So at the end,
fair.
So I didn't listen to it there.
It just made me think. Again, like I said at the start, I low-key miss the old intro, like the slower rendition of the theme. It's that sort of epic feel. But
yeah, I quite like the fast-paced sort of, and it does signify the sort of shift in tone that this series is going to have. This more fast-paced, more sci-fi action kind of feel to it, whereas the last two series have been a bit more slow-paced.
Yeah. I'm sure, obviously this is the first episode where I've heard the more fast-paced version. I'm sure if this is how it is, I'm sure I'm going to get used to it as time goes on. And
it's also
the first, great anyway.
The opening, it's the first time the actual Red Dwarf logo was ever seen.
Yes, I noticed that. I saw it and was like, there it is. Because I was starting to think, because obviously, when you see Red Dwarf on like DVDs and magazines, it's always that famous logo. But in season 1 and 2, we only see it on the side of the ship in the intro.
We only see the words, but it's not, and it's not the famous logo.
Yeah, so I did wonder. I wondered if that was the thing throughout the whole series. Is it never gonna was it designed just for merchandise rather than being in the show? So it's nice to see it pop up this at this point. So, and that in a nutshell was our thoughts on. I'm just gonna say backwards because I daren't try.
One thing we haven't talked about.
Oh, yep, go on.
We haven't really talked about Holly.
Yes, I'll have to say she now, of course, at the minute. But there's not that much of her.
There
really.
isn't. Which, given that they had made this change, and which again, I was looking into the background of this, and basically, Norman Lovett I think they changed where they were filming, and Norman Lovett didn't want to travel.
Right.
I believe. I'm going to find that out. Give me a second, because I think that was on the IMDb of the last episode.
I would have thought they could have just recorded him in a studio, wherever he was, and then sent the tape to the, because he's always on a screen. So he could just be like superimposed or something.
Yeah.
You would have thought, but then maybe they weren't allocating for setting up a studio wherever Norman Lovett was or whatever. But
oh, here it is. Okay, so having recently married and settled in Edinburgh, he felt travelling from Edinburgh to production locations in London and Manchester would prove problematic. So Lovett decided not to come to rehearsals anymore. There was
he just decided not to turn up.
Apparently,
Wonderful.
There was a conflict with the producers, and Lovett was let go. So basically, it sounds like he was like, "That's too far. I'll come for the filming, but I'm just not going to turn up for the rehearsals." And the producers were like, "No,
that's not how this works." Yeah,
and
that's a shame in a way, because you would have thought surely he could have just like rang them and they could have arranged something in, because the BBC had bases in Scotland, like Edinburgh, Scotland.
Yeah.
They could have done something.
Yeah, he also at the time apparently had the promise of his own TV show, which was called I Love It in 1989, and lasted...
I thought you meant as Holly. Then I was
no,
like,
not
what a
as
weird
Holly.
idea. So...
No, but as just himself. So he probably felt that he could flex his muscles a little bit and go, well, if they fire me, I've got this lined up. It doesn't matter too much. But that only lasted one series of 6 episodes, so that didn't go very far.
Oh, blimey. Well, that is a shame, because, we both love Norman Lovett, and it's a shame that he isn't back. But again, like, I would have known he wasn't coming back if I'd read that opening crawl that went at about 100 miles an hour. But, yeah, I just feel like if you are establishing a new person as Holly, basically, she doesn't get that much time in this episode. You literally
she doesn't.
You get the opening scene in the cockpit where she chips in every now and then on Rimmer's wristwatch briefly, and I think that's really about it, if memory serves, in the episode.
Was she on Rimmer's wristwatch? Well, I can't say that word together.
I think it was when they just arrived.
Wasn't she in... Because to me, that looked like she was in the circle bit of Kryton's tummy.
Oh... Maybe it was. Sorry, maybe I got my shots right. I think it's just because I remember Lister did that with his wristwatch in the last season, which was circular, so maybe that's where I'm getting it wrong. But it could have been, it probably was, foreshadowing the Teletubbies almost a decade earlier.
Maybe.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, what we saw from her as well, I don't think it was probably her best stuff. And that was probably just the script. Because I don't know, there's some the lines she said seemed like they were written for Norman, possibly.
Yeah.
Which would make sense if, like, this was quite a late last-minute change because he just didn't turn up to rehearsals.
Yeah, he just decided not to bother.
Well, I'd need some more data before I could give you a precise answer.
Like?
Well, this year's calendar would be handy.
The line that signified that for me was whatever line it was when she said muggins, which I know is, like, slang anyway, but that just sounds like something Norman Lovett would say in a heartbeat, and... I feel like I am curious to see going forward how Holly's going to vie against Kryton, because I feel like now that Kryton's here as a mainstay, it made me think, in the scene in the like cafe when it's clear Kryton can translate the backwards speak. I thought if that wasn't Kryton, that would be Holly doing that on like a wristwatch or a TV or something. So I'm thinking, I wonder going forward if there's going to be any fun sort of like jokey conflict, sort of having essentially like 2 robots or 2
AIs,
sentient AIs on board. I'll be interested to see how much sort of attention they get compared to each other.
Yeah And the lines that did sound like they were written for Norman, I can imagine them being like, I can hear them as Norman Lovett saying them in my head, and they sound a lot funnier than when she said them.
Yeah,
Norman Lovett.
Which is, as we said, is not a dig on the actress herself.
No, because if they are written for the way that Norman Lovett speaks, then
absolutely
that makes sense. And I hope that as we get into episodes where they are writing for her strengths, that she gets some more funnier moments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just hope now that Kryton is essentially becoming a main. Like a main character with the boys. I just hope Holly as a character, no matter who they're played by, doesn't get pushed to the side completely, because that'd be a shame.
Yeah.
I feel Holly as a character is just as much a part of this now as anyone else.
Yeah.
So, But for me, I will have to wait and see.
I have to
what
wait and
becomes
see.
of
I will
it.
tease you with the fact that it's not the last we've seen of Norman Lovett, but it's the
Okay,
last for a
okay.
while.
And when you say a while, do you mean?
Depends if
Bear
you're
in mind we've still got many series to go.
Yeah, quite a few series. Quite a few series.
Okay. All right then. I'll hold my breath. But no, I do like female Holly as well. I don't want it to come across that I don't. Yeah. No.
Yeah, and it is good to get that just a bit of gender difference in the cast as well, because it has been all men so far. So it's nice to get that a bit mixed up a bit like that.
No, absolutely. But essentially, that brings us to the end of our thoughts on Backwards, the Series 3 premiere. But one thing we like to do, we have a few regular segments, one of which is our favourite characters in each episode. So, Phil, who took your favourite spot in the episode today?
It's really difficult. There wasn't really one character that like overwhelmingly wowed me in this episode and thought, oh god, I'm giving it to them. But I will give it to Kryton just because it's his sort of reintroduction episode, and I really did like the scenes in the cockpit when they were doing the training things. So although I think in other episodes that wouldn't have stood out as much, but I just think it was but probably because it was a good ensemble episode. There wasn't anybody that massively stood out to me in this one. What about you?
Yeah, I sort of get what you mean. Everyone sort of has their own like best moment. For me, I'd probably give it to Chris Barry as Rimmer by a hair, just because there's some great reaction. He's so good at reactions. Like, I loved his reaction when, when they're talking about the time hole, and he goes, "No, that's not a time hole, that's a time hole." And then it's a shot where he slowly looks up at he's great at doing stuff like that. And it's stuff that if you don't have the right reaction, like, it's not going to be funny, but just his face absolutely makes. So I give it to him by a whisker, an absolute whisker. Yeah. And the other regular segment we do is a funniest moment or funniest line, joke, whatever. So do you have a clear winner for that?
Well, the only thing that made me actually laugh out loud, and I already know you disagree with it, is the opening sketch with the opening joke with about Wilma Flintstone. That's the only time I actually laughed out loud. So I have to give it to that on that grounds. There was a lot of other stuff that I found funny, but none of it like made me physically laugh out loud other than that.
Not like belly laugh, yeah.
I wasn't quite belly laughing, but it was more of a kind of like like that.
Yeah.
It's a very quick laugh out loud, but it was a verbal appreciation of the joke.
That's absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. As I said, maybe for me, if the build-up didn't take so long, I might have laughed out loud as well. For me, I've mentioned it already. It's a really it's just them walking through the street and Rimmer with his stupid antenna. It's because visually it's so out of place and it's so awkward. But again, I think partly Chris Barry like looking around, confused at what's going on, completely oblivious, because of course Rimmer wouldn't think, "Oh my god, what am I wearing?" He'd own that. He owns wearing that antennae. I don't know why. Out of all the moments, that little panning shot just made me chuckle a lot. So I'm gonna have to give it to that random 3 or 4 seconds for me. And last but not least, we give it a rating. How many scutters out of 10 would you give this, Phil?
I would give this a 7 out of 10.
A 7?
7.
Oh, I wasn't expecting. How come a 7?
I don't know if it's just because I've seen it too many times for the visual gags to be funny anymore. But it's just it wasn't as it. I think it was because my expectations for it were higher than it ended up being. So I think if I hadn't gone into it with such high expectations, because I have really good memories of this episode. Like, I remember really liking this episode, but for some reason when I watched it this time, it just didn't seem as funny as I remembered it, which kind of instantly gives it extra negative points because it's disappointed me because I was like, I thought you were meant to be really, really like top notch, but it's still good. I still really like it. I'm not saying it's a bad episode. Don't get me wrong. It's a good episode and there are some brilliant moments in it. But it just didn't quite live up to what I remembered it being.
No, I hear you. I had the same thing with a film called, if you've heard of it, Four Lions.
I've heard of it. I have not seen it.
Essentially, for those, I won't go into the full plot, and this might sound odd, it's a film about 4 terrorists from Sheffield who are very bad at being terrorists. And that might sound awful, but it's a very funny film. But I rewatched it. It came out in 2010, and I watched it at the time. And I was 14, it was very funny because it was very edgy, very out there humour. I watched it last year during lockdown, and it's still, like you said about this, it's still a good movie, but I didn't find it nearly as funny. And that's probably because I've grown up a bit, or the jokes fell flat. So I know exactly that sentiment when you see something too many times, and some things are endlessly funny, and some things wane over time. I think maybe it's because this hinges on a gimmick, maybe, and gimmicks always sort of lose their effect after a while.
What about yourself? What would you give it out of 10?
I'd give it a bit. I'm going to be a bit more generous. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Points have deducted. I think like we both agreed on the fact how maybe there could have been more of a dialogue gag about the reverse thing rather than emphasis on the visual all the time. Although points for things like the fight at the end, like we said, the setup that must have taken, especially when things are getting thrown around and stuff. The model work is fantastic. The cast are on top form. You can tell like they're no longer like, not that they ever were, but they're no longer like hesitant about their characters in any way. You can tell like they know who these guys are, and they're just, and you can tell what I love is in any show when you can tell the actors are having fun. It shows so, and you can tell these guys are just having a blast by now. So yeah, I know it's nice to see it on location. I like the fact that I know it's a space sitcom, but I like the fact when we go on location, even if it's just to the English countryside or out of Manchester or wherever it is. So, and Robert Llewellyn as well for making a good impression. And again, for someone who'd only seen the previous actor, aside from initially thinking, why is his accent different? I warmed to him pretty quickly, and that's partly because of the way he played him. So I'm looking forward to see what's more to come. So yeah, not my favourite episode ever, but I think a solid start to Series 3. Why not? Yeah. Well, there you go. And you'll have to join us next time when we look at Series 3, Episode 2. Our journey doth indeed continue. Can you remember the title off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I cannot. It might be
you Red Dwarf aficionados.
Might be Marooned.
Marooned. That rings a bell because I looked at it. It might be Marooned. Let's go with that. Assume it's Marooned. And that's what I'll be if I get that wrong by the comments. I'll be completely marooned. But no, thank you very much if you're still here for watching / listening to Everybody's Dead Dave. Phil, where can they find this podcast and indeed yourself?
Well, you might already be watching it on. When I say watching it, it's watching a squiggly line with some lovely pictures behind which are drawn by Sophie Isles. And a static image of the podcast logo, but that's fine. You might be watching on YouTube, but if you're not, you can find me there. Philip Hawkins is my name, and I talk about all sorts of geeky pop culture stuff like Red Dwarf and a lot of Doctor Who and Star Trek and the MCU and things like that. So that's the main place to find me, is on YouTube. But you might already be listening to this. If you are listening to this on YouTube, let us know what you think in the comments below.
Yeah, please do.
Of this episode, not of us specifically. Although you can if you want to.
We're sensitive souls. Come on, you gotta be nice to us.
Of the Red Dwarf episode.
Of the Red Dwarf episode. Yeah, we do find it interesting to see what you guys think of the episodes, and it's nice to see whether you're like Phil, someone who's been watching for a while and is a big fan, or someone like me, if you're doing this journey with us for the very first time, or if you've been inspired to check this show out, then again, let us know. We'd love to see it. And subscribe to Phil's channel if you want to see this on YouTube. If you want to check out some of my work, I'm also on YouTube, Adam Martyn with a Y. Similar to Phil, I do a lot of pop culture stuff, and I'm also on Twitter at Adam Martyn Actor, where you can post my daily ramblings, where I post things like the Brum theme tune and say, let's all stand for the national anthem, because I've clearly got too much time on my hands. But yeah, if you like that sort of thing, come check us out. And yeah, on the whole, we will see you next time for Series 3, Episode 2. Until then, see you later.
Bye-bye.